My guest today is Annie, a blogger behind The Londoner in Sydney, where she shares honest, real stories about living in Australia and the quieter work of finding her own authenticity along the way. What I'm drawn to the most in Annie's writing is her willingness to let go of the need to fit in and instead explore what it means to live with integrity, self-trust, and truth. Her reflections invite a real sense of permission to soften, to question, and to be real. Today's conversation is about how a place can shape identity, how travel can become a mirror, and what it looks like to live authentically from the inside out. Annie, welcome. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Rosie, and I'm really excited to be here.
It sounds really tropical where you are as well. I can hear all the birds in the background.
Oh, can you? Oh, yeah, I'm in Sunshine Coast hinterland, so just moved here a couple months ago, and the bird life here is just amazing. Every day, I'm just completely blown away by it.
I'm a Queensland girl, so I know the sounds well. It is a really beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, it really is. I've done a lot of travel around Australia, and Sunshine Coast hinterland for me is my favorite little spot. So I'm super, super lucky to be able to live here.
So beautiful. Annie, how did the Londoner in Sydney come into being and who were you becoming at that point of your life?
Oh gosh. So London and Sydney started like a long time ago, probably like 12 years ago or so. It started in 2014. So we had just come back, my husband and I have just come back to Australia from 12 months of traveling around the world. And we spent a few months in Malawi in Africa, and we were building out a website for a charity there. It was a very spontaneous time, and it was a really special time. Probably it did more for us than what it did for the charity in the long run, because as soon as we came back to Australia, I realized what I wanted to do. And so at the time, I really wanted to work in fashion. And I realized if I want to work in fashion, I'm going to have a fashion blog. This is back in the days when blogs were really big, back in 2014. And so I just called it London and Sydney. And that's how it started to evolve. But then over time, I realized the fashion thing wasn't really doing anything for me or working. And then it just evolved into this whole sort of travel, expat sort of community. And it just grew from there. And it's still going today, which is amazing. It's probably the longest thing I've ever stuck at, apart from my husband.
Wow, so 12 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
12 years. And it's just been, it started as something that we obviously could because I wanted to work in fashion. And then as it evolved, it just became more of a hobby and helped us get out and about at weekends while we were living in Sydney, obviously. And we got to really experience all these beautiful places to explore around the Sydney area. And then it just evolved from there. And once I worked out how to monetize the site, then it grew into a business. And so, yeah,
Mm,
that's what I do today, which is incredible, really.
pretty awesome. And I guess having family back home in the UK, showing what you were doing, sharing all the content with family and friends, and they were probably wanting to see more if they hadn't have been in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they have this sort of preconception about Australia just being really hot, full of lots of dangerous animals,
Yeah.
and I'm sure on why I'd want to move that far away, like from the UK. Australia is just too far. It's like no one would go to Australia. It's just too far to go over to. Whereas for me, I grew up watching a lot of Australian TV, so like Neighbours, Home and Away, Heartbreak High. Back in the day, they
Yes.
programs were very, very big, so it was always something that I knew I was gonna gravitate towards,
Mm.
and here I am now 15 years later still here, so yeah.
It sounds like you have that real adventurer spirit as well, which is what got you here.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that was a lot of that's actually probably to do with my husband. He's a very big adventurer, and he's taught me a lot actually in the last 15 years, not only about exploring more, but also in a spiritual sense as well. So spirituality has become a big part of our lives as
Mm.
well, which has been really amazing to sort of dig deep within, which has totally changed my life as well.
And especially when you're spending so much time in nature, I feel like you do become more highly attuned to things, right? Which is exactly where we're meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely right because I feel like over the years, It was someone who was living in London, right in the middle of London, and working in the middle of London as well, with a lot of celebrities and famous people, and really loving that sort of life. And as time has gone on, we've realized to strip everything back. And now we're living quite remotely, where we live like an hour away from the beach, which in Sunshine Coast, a lot of people live in the Sunshine Coast want to live by the beach, obviously. And when we moved up here to the hinterland, people did say to us, like, "You're gonna find it really lonely up there." It's not, don't know if it's really the right thing to do, but for us, it's honestly just paradise. We absolutely love it. So it's been
Mm.
an interesting evolution from being a real city girl to now I'm just loving being in nature.
Yeah, and so important. So and the beauty is you can dip in and dip out when you want to.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting because we've now swapped it around. When people go on holidays, they want to escape from the city and go somewhere nice and quiet. Whereas for us now, our holidays we're like, oh, let's go to the city and live it up and go to really nice restaurants, and things are open past 4 p.m. How exciting! We can go and
Yes.
do that now. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely swapped around for sure.
Mm. And so what was happening inside you when you began sharing that part of your life when you transitioned to the Londoner in Sydney?
Um, well, I think London and Sydney has just evolved so much over the years. If I look at my Instagram page, that's where my most connected audience is, even though we have a lot of different channels that we broadcast on, so like podcast, YouTube, and then also the blog and Instagram, TikTok as well. So, but Instagram is really where a lot of our community are based. And for us, they are very much like, they're just like our friends, really. Like, I'm always asking advice from them. And I think when it started, it was very impersonal, actually. There's a big trend on at the moment with this whole, like, what was your 2016 looking like back then? And I was looking back through those photos the other day, and I just thought, gosh, my Instagram was so bland. It was just sharing outfits and just sharing which brands I was wearing, and that was it. There was no personality in there whatsoever. But over the years, I've talked a lot to my audience about really personal things that I probably wouldn't even talk to somebody I really know. And there's this bizarre sort of connection that you can have with people over the internet that feels like you're much freer, in a sense that you can, I don't know, that maybe it's just that barrier where you can feel like you can be more yourself. And if you are going
Mm.
to get trolled, you can just turn that off and pretend it's not happening because they're not right there in your face being horrible to you. I don't know. There's a weird thing about it where I feel like I can talk to my audience about anything, and that's really evolved over time. And I think that's what's really helped really build that community as well, because I think people are really looking for more of that authentic audience when you're on social media, especially now with AI. You've got AI music,
Sure.
AI people, AI videos, everything that's
Mhm.
happening. And already people are sick of that. So showing that more real life communication with your audience is really going to help build that as well and make those communities much stronger.
And I guess a lot can happen in 10 years, right? So when you start out, like you said, you're doing some fashion posts and everything was a bit bland and a bit boring. But then I guess you start to build that trust with your community and then that
Yeah.
builds. And then the more you sort of share and the more feedback you get, the more open you become. And then it just gets bigger and then boom, you're authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a bit of a fine line, though, in terms of how much you do share. And sometimes I kind of forget that as well. And especially if I do meet people like out on the street and they'll go, oh, yeah, we know all about this, this. And I'm like, well, that's really weird. You know everything about me.
Yes.
I kind of forget that the online world is real in a sense as well. Like, people do know a
Mm.
lot of stuff. Like, I've talked a lot to my audience about infertility. Even now of our new house, like I was saying to somebody the other day, like, our audience is so engaged that I was asking our audience about how should we do the layout in our living room, because we've got a bit of a strange layout in our living room. And within minutes, I had people sending back AI mock-ups of what the living room should look like, and
Wow.
I was blown away because I didn't even ask them to do that, and I was never even expecting that. So that was really amazing to.
Yeah, just to have that power of connection with people, right? So it's like,
Yeah,
hang
and
on, we haven't even met yet. Here we are
yeah.
supporting one another. Yeah.
It's amazing. Like I had somebody the other day who sent me a message at 5:30 in the morning to say that they had seen a um, sofa on Marketplace for us. And they said, "Oh, I thought the sofa would really suit you." And I was thinking the fact that you remember our names, because most people, you don't really remember their names on Instagram or any social platforms. You'll see them and be like, "Oh yeah, I know them," but you might not
That's
remember
right.
who they are. So the fact that they even remembered to go into Instagram to find us, even remembered that what our story was, and then to send us a link to that, at 5:30 in the morning, and I thought, "Wow, that is incredible," you know? So
Because I guess when you're posting as well, you don't actually think, okay, I'm going to reach, 5, 10,000 people today or whatever. You think that you're just like reaching out to only a handful of people. You don't realize
yeah,
that it's much bigger than what it is.
yeah, and that's also with my website as well. Like I posted the other day, to really share about how I make money as a content creator, because
Mm.
you see it a lot online where people talk about, "Oh, I made 50K this month," and they won't really say how they made that, or it's very, very
Yes, I
vague.
saw that post. It was
So
fabulous.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had put it out there and said, "Oh, are you anybody interested to see how this actually works?" And the response was huge. So I thought, okay, I'll do it. And I did feel a little bit vulnerable doing it, because I was a bit worried that people might be like, "Oh, you're just trying to show off," or you never know how people are going to
It's
react.
like that inner
Um,
critic that comes out, right? But I think it was
yeah,
very clear because like you said, when people are saying that I made this amount, you're like, "Well, how?" And then you think it's not attainable because you don't have the steps to get there. But
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
nice for it to be broken down, which you did in a really clear way.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, and I think it's just showing people that anybody can do this. You don't need to be a certain way. And I think that's what I've struggled with a lot in my life, is that sort of identity. And I think when I was living in Sydney, looking back to those 2016 moments of really trying to, I was really desperate to become somebody who was light in terms of what I wore. And
Mm.
I thought, oh well, if I end up with thousands of followers because I look really cool or something, then I've made it. And it was just a really
Yeah.
random thing that I told myself. And I just think back to all these moments where I've told myself these just random stories that just do not exist at all. And that's what I've learned over time.
Teaching yourself that you have to be a certain way to fit in or to be liked.
Exactly. Yeah,
And
yeah,
when
yeah,
you're
totally.
being like or trying to be a certain way, you're not being yourself.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that is a big path I've been going through for a while, and I think a lot of that's down to moving to a different country. And I
Mm.
think people assume that England and Australia are very similar, and obviously we speak the same language, but I think it can be very, very different in terms
Mm.
of just day to day things like making friends, feeling like you fit in, especially if you've come from somewhere like London and then suddenly you're in a beach culture place. It is very, very
Totally.
different. Yeah.
But also even just moving, I found moving from Queensland to Sydney, like it's hard
Yeah.
to crack into an existing community. I find a lot of
Yeah.
my friends are not from Sydney. They're
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
abroad or from Queensland or interstate. So I
Yeah.
find Sydney in particular a bit of a tough nut to crack that way.
Yeah.
Queensland, it's a bit more chill. Everyone's a bit more open
Yeah.
armed, not sort of dissing Sydney. I love Sydney, but it's just a bit more protective, I feel,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
in my experience.
I always found with people, with Australians, unless they had traveled quite a lot, that it would be easy to make friends with them if they had lived, for example, like overseas or something like that, then it
Mm.
was much easier.
And so you spoke about integrity before and coming here and fitting in. So before
Mm.
you were living fully in integrity, what were you most fearful of?
I think it's just being I think I'm still trying to figure things out now in terms
Mm.
of who I am, and trying to live that sort of authentic life as much as possible in a way. And I think back then I was a lot younger and I was a lot more fearless in a sense. Like back then, times were just about going to, I mean, my work back then was working in radio where it was just more like a party every day and getting to see amazing musicians play in front of you and going out. I mean, it was an incredible place to be in my 20s. It was fantastic. If I was to work somewhere like there now in my 40s, I'd probably find it completely different and it probably wouldn't be for me at all. But back then it was great. And I suppose I wasn't probably thinking as much about who I am or living in a day to day life.
Mm.
So I wasn't really thinking much beyond that.
It's more about fitting in, isn't it? If we look back at those early 20s, you're not
Yeah.
thinking deeply like that, are you? But it does kinda come at a cost when you're not living with integrity, don't you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah. For sure. For sure. And I think there were definitely times in London where I did feel quite lonely. But I think that was due to just going out and drinking too much alcohol and just having those sort of blues afterwards and realizing that I just felt like there was a lot more to life than being on the tube all
Mm.
day, every day, getting to work and
And going out to bars and nightclubs and drinking. I say that to my sons as well. It's like, "Oh,
yeah.
I want a life for you hiking mountains and going
Yeah,
on
yeah.
adventures, not like getting pissed at the pub every Friday and Saturday night."
Yeah, my friend says that quite a lot to me. I've got a really good friend who lives in Sydney that I went to school with, and she always says that one of her biggest regrets was spending her university years just going out drinking all the time, where she wished she had spent more of the time exploring the area. Whereas, I said to her that that was just part of growing up back then. Like times have
Mm.
changed quite a bit now since, but back then that was like your rite of passage really
Yeah.
into university life and just to be okay with that, like be glad that that did not continue on further than
Yeah,
that.
totally.
So
And it's
yeah,
not too late for your friend. You still can go hiking mountains
she
and
does.
exploring
Yeah,
the
she
world,
definitely does that.
right?
Yeah.
Especially having a friend like you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So
So, talk to me about the Londoner in Sydney as a travel platform. So, how did you go from working in marketing to becoming
mm.
a trusted travel guide?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it's down to my husband really because
Mhm.
like I came to Australia first 20 years ago. I can't believe it was 20 years ago this year as a backpacker. And I spent a lot of that time traveling around the country and then I went to a few other countries afterwards. And I kind of always knew I wanted to come back to Australia. So when I met him, I actually met him in India when I was on a 6 month trip. I was only meant to be away for 6 months and that's been like 15 years. And he taught me a lot about travel, and his sort of routine that he was doing every year was, he'd go and travel for like a year or two and then come back to Australia, to Sydney, work for another year, and then he'd go off again. And that's what he did a lot, like in his 20s. And then I met him in his early 30s. And so even during that time, for those next, up until I think he was about 40, we then did the same thing together. So we would then work for a year, go off for a year, come back, and then keep doing the same thing. So I got to see a lot of countries because of him. And
Mm.
that excitement of going somewhere new and experiencing a new culture was so infectious for us that we just loved it. And we still do now. Times have changed slightly for us now because we have two dogs and we just bought a house. So we can't do it as much as we used to. But um, for us, the travel site really became a thing where it was such an incredible feeling to be able to help show people that there was more to Australia rather than just being in Bondi or Manly, for example, which is where a lot
Mm.
of, lot of Brits end up and they don't really escape that sort of bubble. And I wanted to show them that actually there's more places you can visit while also really helping those smaller tourism operators as well around the country and the smaller sort of regions. So that's how it sort of evolved from there, really.
I love that. And it sounds like you've had such an enriched life of travel before. Why Australia out of any other country to settle in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question because we did spend about 10 years trying to find our place. We were like, where is our place? We need to find it. And it just, it's weird how it ended up. Like just before COVID, we were pet sitting up and down the East Coast. We ended up in a really beautiful town in Queensland called Agnes Water in 1770. It's a little remote beach town where we were pet sitting, and we ended up staying there for 2 years because of COVID. And it was just magical. And I think understanding what it was like to live remotely in a little beach paradise like that was really special. But there were parts sort of where we realized actually we need a little bit more than this because we love to travel so much. We saw everything there was to see within like a 5 hour radius of the area. And we just felt like we need to be closer to more places. So we came down to Sunshine Coast, and then that's now evolved into living in the hinterland. But we still have really good access to Brisbane, Gold Coast, Byron Bay, all these like really big areas that have a lot going on as well. So it's still
Mm,
sort of fulfilling that travel thing within us to be able to go off whenever we want to on weekends and see different
mm.
places.
And from babysitting those dogs, you learnt very quickly that you needed a couple of dogs by the sounds of
Oh,
it.
absolutely, yeah. I think once we like, looked after 2 dogs, and we were like, "We definitely need 2 dogs. We need a dog
Yeah.
each," and, that's definitely what we have now, so
I love
which
that.
is
It's
great.
fabulous. So what was missing for you in the work you were doing before? What was missing then in compared to now?
So, look, I think the problem for me with working for somebody else is I've grown up in a family where we've run our own businesses anyway, and maybe that's just rubbed off on me, but I've always struggled with corporate work, and I don't really know why, and it's always been something where I'm like, "Why am I doing that?" Like, I feel like I'm benefiting a person on a yacht somewhere, and I'm
Yeah.
not getting paid very much. Why am I doing this? So there's something always been within me that I wanted to do my own thing, my own
Mm,
business.
mhm,
Also, I'm very much a person who I struggle in the corporate environment to be a professional corporate person because I am who I am. And
mhm,
so that doesn't always work out very well in terms of just being able to be okay with like decisions that are being made or different things. And yeah, I just struggle with that. I've just
mm.
realized the corporate world is probably not best for me at
I
all.
worked that out a long time ago. And it's just like fitting the mold, right? It's a certain type of mold that you have to fit.
Yeah, and the problem with it is it never really felt very authentic to me either in that sense. And what's been very hard is to go from living a life where you're traveling around the world, you can do whatever you want in your own time, um, and explore places in your own time. And it's really hard to make that transition from travel to then back into this reality where you're then working 9 to 5 every day. And for my husband and I, we've always struggled with being okay with that, even though we know that we need to work. Obviously, we need to make money to be able to live, but just being okay with having that restrictions of when you can take time off, for example, or be able to
Mm.
do whatever you want. That's what we've always really struggled with for some reason.
But I love that you worked it out. You both knew that that was inside of you and there had to be a better way. Like you said earlier, you're grinding away and doing the hard slog and working for someone else who's sitting on their yacht drinking cocktails. You
Yeah.
wanted that life. And so it was like, how can I have this life so we can live our best life? Which is amazing because so many people are grinding away at a job that they don't love.
Yeah, exactly. I have a therapist that I see, to be honest, I hadn't seen her for ages. And then something happened within the universe, right, that just made me see her. And I'd just come back from India. I'd just been to India a couple of months ago. Went back to a meditation course that I've done a few times before, which was just incredible. And I came back and I knew the job wasn't right for me that I was in. And she just sent me a message and said, "Hey, I've got an appointment that's just come up. Do you want it?" And I said, "Actually, yeah, I really do." And I spoke to her and she just said, "You need to you need to quit your job and never go back to corporate." And she said that 80% of her clients come to her because of the stress of their corporate jobs.
Mm,
And I told my husband that, and he was like, "No way, like other people feel like we do." And I said,
it's a
"Yeah, we're not the
huge
only
number.
ones."
80%.
Yeah, that's what she said, 80%. And so that felt a big relief. And I think even her just giving me that validation that, hey, you're not meant for this, and that's okay. And I think I was brought up in a world where, you've got to go and get a corporate job. You've got to have a
Yeah.
house. You've got to have children. You've got to do all these things. And if you don't do that, there's something wrong with you. And so I've sort of
Mm.
been conditioned to think that this is what we're supposed to do.
That was a generation, right? It's like, get a job. Don't worry about your
Yeah.
dreams. Just go get
Yeah.
a job, a real job, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was interesting just to have that validation from her to say, this business is not for you and there's nothing wrong with you by it not fitting you. Like, it's okay that it doesn't work. So I was really grateful for that conversation to have that. And I think it's such a shame that there's such a stigma around people having therapists in general because they can help you so much in terms of just
Mm.
being able to clarify things that are going on, you know?
It sounds like her words of wisdom gave you that permission to go, "Right, what am I
Yeah.
doing? I need to shake
Yeah,
things
and
up."
I mean, it worked out tremendously well because as I was driving back from that appointment, I got an email saying, "Hey, we're making you redundant." And I was like, "No way, this is amazing." So
Yes.
I was like, "Thank you." And I sent a message to my group for my meditation course, and everybody was like, "Wow, that's amazing."
It's like
Like,
the universe
that happened.
provided you exactly what you needed at the right
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that was incredible.
So, Annie, I what drew me into you and how you've come about on the podcast was one of your posts. You spoke about the Australia effect, something people often don't talk about. And
Mm,
that really warmed my heart. Can you share
mm.
what you meant by that?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I think it was about I mean, it's a classic Instagram story, isn't it, of people saying, "This is my glow up, how much Australia's changed me." You know, that if you haven't heard about the Australia effect, it's basically a lot of British people who will show you, like women, for example, being really dolled up for a night out, and then they live in Australia and they've stripped everything back, where they've got no makeup on and they're at the beach, for example, or guys who looked a bit miserable and now they're looking really hot because they're living in Australia. And I think what I was saying is that um, while Australia can contribute towards me having changed over the years, for example, like I think it's very easy not to drink alcohol in Australia. Like I very rarely drink. I don't even really go to the pubs or anything like that. And that's been like that for a long time where I haven't really drank alcohol. Whereas in England, people would think, you know, what's wrong with you if why would you give it alcohol for? Because it's a very sociable thing there. But what I found over here is that it was more about time really that had changed me rather than it being a specific place. And although I would say, especially living like up in the Sunshine Coast now, one thing that really drew us here, which you probably wouldn't notice if you came on holiday, like a lot of people go to Noosa, for example, on holidays, which is amazing because Noosa is fantastic, but there's a lot more to the Sunshine Coast than that. And there's a lot of like spirituality here. And I think having access to that as well has really what's helped change me in terms of having meditation retreats here, having breath work, kirtan. I mean, the list goes on really. We've even got my husband and I are both Buddhist. We've got a Buddhist center here in Sunshine Coast, which is so beautiful. Every time we go there, it feels like we're stepping back into India, which is so special to
Mm.
have that. And I think all of that sort of contributed towards us now living this slower pace of life, of living in the hinterland with our dogs and with all the wildlife here, and living on land where we feel like we're not boxed in anymore. Like we have lived in a lot of very small shoe boxes before. Now we
Mm.
actually have that space to breathe, really, and it's amazing.
And it sounds like community was a big part of that. You've got everything on your doorstep, all the things that are really important to you is
Mm.
right there.
Sure. I think, and actually, it's quite interesting because we lived in down by the coast in Sunshine Coast for 4 years, and we didn't really make any major friends there. Like we knew a lot of people that we'd see at different events and stuff like that, who are really lovely and nice people. But actually, having those proper friendships has been harder to secure, and I think that's why we moved up to the hinterland because we knew around our area is very community focused, and that's super
Mm.
important for us going forward to be able to build those connections. So, and it's been fantastic to be honest. We've probably got to know more people on our dog walk in the last 2 months than what we did in 4 years to where
Isn't
we
it
were before.
amazing how many people you can meet on in a dog park?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah. So I think human connections are so crucial now to society because, I mean, like I don't have children, but I can't even imagine what it's like for children and teenagers now. I mean, obviously they've cut back the social media in Australia for children, but when I think about the interactions in terms of social
Mm,
media and how they're just on their phones all the time, like it's not just
totally.
children and teenagers, it's like
It's
everybody's on
all
their
of
phones all
us.
the time.
You know what? It really gets me down, and you see it, and it just becomes normal. I was telling my daughter the other day, I remember walking down Queen Street Mall, and if somebody had a phone and was walking down the street, they'd just be called a wanker. And now look at all of us. It is
I
just
know.
normal at every bus stop, in every doctor's waiting room,
Man,
crossing the lights. Like, we are so addicted to our phones.
I tell you what, there's it's interesting seeing going back to London and how no one's on the phone there because everyone's worried about, the phone thieves that are around. So that's a
Yes.
completely different story over there, not seeing people with their phones out at all.
That's
Um,
interesting.
yeah, yeah, it's very, very different. So compared to here, but I mean, that's the great thing about living in Australia is like there's this safety here where I feel like I don't have to worry about things like that happening as they do over there. So
Mm.
that's something that's really nice about living here for sure.
And back to that post, the Australia effect, I think what I sensed from that was just freedom.
Mm.
There was just a sense of spaciousness and freedom in that post, and perhaps that is what helps you come home to yourself.
Yeah, thank you. And that's really amazing that you thought that because I think the problem with doing things like meditation is that a lot of people are very willing to work on their bodies or they go to the gym and everything. But as soon as you mention meditation, people go, oh, I can't do that. I couldn't meditate. I couldn't sit
Mm,
still for 5 minutes or I couldn't go to a silent retreat. No way could I not talk for so many days on end. But I think once you start to chip away with meditation and just slowing everything right down, that's when you start to find the real you as well. Because once you
mm.
can have compassion for yourself, you can have compassion for everybody else as well. So it changes a lot, and then within that compassion, that's then shows how you then treat people as well, and how you talk to people and interact with people going forward. So it's always interesting when I go back to cities because I see the complete opposite because people are just so in their worlds of being like, okay, I've got to get to work, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. They're always trying to do
It's like
things.
they wear the busy badge of honor, you know? It's like, I'm so busy, 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 and a lot of it is when it's too quiet or too still, it's really uncomfortable for a lot of people to sit in the spaciousness and the stillness. It's too loud, so
Yeah,
they are busy, busy, busy just to not be able to avoid sitting in that, but
it's a
sitting in
distraction.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right, but sitting in that is the most powerful thing you can ever experience.
Yeah, totally. And I think it is a huge distraction. Like I grew up in a family where it was very classic British, like 80s, 90s, where sweep everything under the floor, pretend it's not
Mhm.
happening, everything's fine. And so like I'm totally different to my family now in
Yeah,
terms of being really open and that's why I'm so open on my channel,
yeah.
um but also trying to really dig deep within and stripping away all those childhood traumas and everything that we've all been through in our lives, and just being able to unpack that and being okay with that as well. And I think it's so easy to pretend that all these things didn't happen, and but you realize that you are the way you are because of these things that have happened until you can sort of confront them and let go of them. That's when you start to change.
And have that empathy and that compassion, like you said, just to connect to those little girl parts inside of us that need our
Hmm.
attention. It's not about
Hmm.
going back and dwelling in the past, like people think, "Why would you wanna go back and in the past?" But it's not that. It's going back and tending to those wounded parts so
Yeah,
then you can move forward.
and I think that's the problem with when you move to another country is the old part of you is still sitting in your
Mm.
old country. And so that for me has been a really interesting one over so many years of going back to England and wanting to reconnect with my university friends, well, we haven't been at university for 20 years, but to me, it's like, oh, let's all meet up or have fun together. And we've all changed hugely over that time. And when I lived back in England, I went back there for 6 months back in 2018, and I thought we were going to have those connections all the time, but it just didn't work out like that. Everyone's busy doing their own thing. It's a one off when you get to actually meet up. And realizing over time that things had changed. Like I remember going back, there were times where I think that was a World Cup was on, or some sort of football thing, and everybody in England goes crazy over it. And seeing the pubs being really busy and people being very drunk, and I was thinking, "Oh my god, it's really dangerous, like, we need to get out of here," and, my English friends are going, "Well, it's fine, like, don't be so
Yeah.
silly," and just realizing, like, how much I had changed, because of living over here as well. It's very interesting to
I
see.
hear you. I really hear you. I think when you've gone within and have that self-awareness and done self-reflection work, everything changes. I don't like being around lots of heavy drinking either. For me, it just dysregulates my whole system. And you're just more aware, I think is what it is. You know, everyone's on their own journey. I appreciate that. But yeah, for me now I'm too sensitive in that environment.
Yeah, I think, it was really interesting. I went back last Christmas for the first time in 14, 15 years, and while I thought I'd really missed British Christmas, and I went back and I remember being on the trains and I was listening to my kirtan music, which is basically like really ancient old Indian mantras that you sing over and over, and I was listening to those on the trains in London, and I was just thinking, could I ever imagine, like, being here again and listening to this and being that person I am in Australia now, but like back here, and I just thought, no, that's never. I just can't bring those two worlds together. Like my life in Australia is so much better than what it would be here, and I just don't think that would work for me at all.
So Australia is home.
Absolutely, for sure, yeah, definitely.
And plus, I mean, having a hot summer with prawns on the barbie for Christmas is way better than sitting in the freezing cold.
Well, there's one thing I realized actually when I went back is while Christmas is really beautiful there, it's as soon as it's finished. And then you realize, my gosh, everyone's gonna have to deal with this weather for the next, like, probably 6 months of it being grey like this, at least.
Yeah.
And I thought, "Yeah, no, I gotta
No,
get
no,
back."
no, no. Tropical Queensland, so much better. So, Annie, you've explored more of Australia than many Australians themselves. Why
Mm.
do you think so many Aussies head overseas before seeing their own country?
I think it's a natural thing to do, first of all, because, like, I would imagine my husband probably seen more of the UK than what I have. Like, I've never been to Scotland. I've been to Dublin once. I haven't seen the rest of Ireland. And So I think it's a natural thing to want to leave the country, first of all, to go on
Mm.
holidays. I also think it's a cost thing as well. I think a lot of Australians obviously will head to places like Bali because you can get cheap flights. It doesn't take that long to get there. What you get over there is pretty amazing in terms of accommodation and itself is really amazing. But I think what they're missing out on Australia is really like an absolutely incredible country to really go and visit. And I think like a year and a half ago, we did a van trip around the UA, Northern Territory, and then down to Adelaide. It was just absolutely incredible. Like some of the places we saw. Australia's got some of the probably the most untouched places in the world, really, when you see like what some of the wildlife looks like, the nature, just the landscapes. It really is like being on another planet, and there are some really special places to go and see around here, and it doesn't need to be as expensive as what you think. And I think that's
Mm.
the problem. The misconception is everyone just thinks, oh, it'll be too expensive to fly here or do a road trip around there, but you can make it as cheap as you want. So, like, if you're in a camper van or a motorhome or something, you're most likely just going to cook in your campsite. You're not really going to be eating out every day. It's very different than just having like 5 days in Byron Bay where you probably spend an extortionate amount of money because you're just hitting up all the
Totally.
big restaurants and stuff. Whereas if you're doing more of those sort of camping trips, it can become quite cost effective.
Mm.
And you realize like Australia's got some of the best beaches in the world easily,
Oh,
like
the
especially
best.
down by Esperance, that area. Like
Mm.
I don't think I've seen better, and I've been to quite a lot of countries. So yeah, it's pretty incredible.
And is there a hidden gem in Australia that holds real meaning for you, not just visually, but emotionally as well?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. There's too many places I think to even to even say.
Is
I
there a
think we did.
special place?
We did. Well, we did a scenic flight in the Kimberley. and it was over a
Mm.
place called the Bungle Bungles, and
Oh, I saw that on your Instagram.
oh, did you?
It
It was
looked
just
spectacular.
unbelievable. It was so crazy. It was like being in, like, a whole 'nother world, like another planet,
Mm,
like Jurassic Park or something, and
mm.
you just saw these huge gorges that were just opening up, and it was really spectacular, and even just to fly over there, just seeing how vast the land just stretches, like, it was really
Wow.
incredible, and then you think about places like Kakadu as well, like, everybody knows Kakadu is a place to go and visit, but when you go and see that, like, we've done African safaris when we travel around Africa, and we've seen all of that, which was amazing, but there was something really special about Kakadu for sure, like, really, really
Mm.
beautiful.
Magical land.
Very much.
Mm. Okay. So do certain places mark chapters for you?
Places. Wow,
Mm.
I've never even thought about it like that before.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe. I think there's been times where we can look back and think, "Oh, this is the time when we were doing this and in that sort of headspace," and how times have evolved since then, for sure, I would say. But yeah, it's I mean, the problem with us is that we travel to a lot of places in a very short spaces of time. So sometimes it's, like, quite easy to even forget, like, when we can think back and go, "Oh, yeah, we actually went to this place or this country," and I completely forgot because, 3 days later, we're in a whole different country and exploring that.
Yes.
So and that's the problem with when you're doing travel, like long-term travel, is it can all blend into one experience. And so now when we take shorter trips, we can appreciate them a lot more because it's not a case of, "Oh, here's another amazing historical site. Great, let's move on to the next." Now we can sit and go, wow, isn't this amazing? Like, I now see history in a completely different way after moving to Australia. Like, if I go back to the UK and I see, like a fence that was built in the 1400s, and I'll be like,
Mm.
wow, that's crazy. That's still sitting there after all that time. It's still there
Yeah.
right now.
The history.
Yeah, whereas I would never have looked at it like that before. So,
But you know what? I think that's good advice about what you said about not going from one place to another, to actually spend time in each
mm,
place. And I find for
mm,
Australians, if we are going overseas, you want to be going to all these different places. It's to get your money's worth, or, you know,
mm.
get more bang for your buck with the time factor, because it's a long way to go. But then you are sort of just ticking boxes. It's nice to actually immerse yourself into different cultures and different countries rather than rushing it.
But I think the problem with that is because Australia is just so far away from everywhere, you do wanna get the
Hmm.
most out of these trips. Like, I remember being when I went back to UK and I said to my brother, "Oh, yeah, we're going to Italy for 9 days in a couple of days," and he was like, "9 days you're going there for?" Like, to him, that was really long because in England, people tend to go on really short trips, like, they don't tend to take long periods of time off work, where it's more like, "Oh, I'll go to Rome for 4 days and then come back," because
Mm.
the flight's only like an hour, whereas you would never do that from Australia and fly all the way to Rome for 4 days because it's so far and so expensive to get there that you do want to go and try and see as much as you possibly can. But there have been definitely places that we've been to in Italy where we've spent like a day or 2 there, and I'm thinking, "Oh, I wish we had more time here to really properly enjoy it," you know? And it's a hard trade-off being living in Australia, really.
It's a long way. What has travel taught you about authenticity that staying still never could?
Mm. I think with travel, when you get to meet a lot of different cultures around the world and what different communities are going through, and in terms of their state of happiness. I mean, we've probably seen this a lot before, but when I visited poorer countries, you see people tend to seem a lot. I say seem because I can't make a judgment on that, but they seem much happier than what people more in
Mm,
Western cultures are. And I think a lot of that comes down to the community around them because they have such strong families and big
mm,
families where they're all living together and all supporting each other. And I think when we don't have that, in a lot of these Western countries where there's a lot of loneliness going on, and people don't have that support network around them, that's when you start to see the differences. So I think being able to appreciate all these different cultures and the way that people live has really helped me sort of be able to analyze the sort of life that I want to live as well. and that's helped put things into perspective. So when you see somebody who gets angry because they didn't get on a train or they're stuck in traffic, and I'm thinking, well, things we've seen around the world, like when you've got children who are banging on your taxi window wanting food and stuff, and they're probably being exploited by somebody else who's just wanting to get money.
Mm,
And you're thinking, gosh, we're so lucky to live where we live and have the lives that we have.
totally. It's putting it all into perspective, isn't it?
Mm.
What's in store for 2026 this year for the Londoner in Sydney or in
Ah,
Queensland?
yes. Well, 2026. So the last few years, it's a bit corny, but we've been having like coming up with like this word for the year. And it's trying to stick with that word each year. So this year, my word was fearlessness. And that is because I've spent the last few years in a complete procrastination cycle of just feeling like I can't do anything. And, whether that's posting on social media channels, I've had my podcast sitting there for the last 18 months, which is now the second series has just gone live. Thank gosh.
Yes.
And it's all these little things that have been put off and realizing what a waste of time that was. Like, what was I
Mm.
thinking not doing that? Like, no one really cares at the end of the day. I think we think people care more than what they actually do. And it's at the end of the day, we're the only ones who really care about it. And so
Absolutely.
going forward with this year, just doing as much as I can and getting to a place where I can now um, earn enough money to be able to make what I'm doing a full time like job really because I got made
Mm.
redundant at the end of last year and realizing this is an amazing opportunity to go forward with everything I want to do. So that's only really going to happen if I stop the procrastination. And I've read a few books recently that have really helped understand that. And one of them was actually the 5 second rule by Mel
Oh, yes.
Robbins.
Love that.
And I think it's because I hadn't really read any books about anxiety before, and I've struggled with anxiety a lot since because I went through very early menopause.
Mhm.
And in that book, she says that like procrastination is just a form of fear and just how you're not in control of your life if you let that take over. And I'm very much a bit of a control freak of, you know, knowing that I need to be in control of my
Mm.
own life really and understanding that. So every time it sort of creeps in, I just remember, no, that's not taking over. I need to stay in control of this. And so just having these little tools to be able to um, move forward with the things I want to do and stop letting this just wasting all this time. That's a major one.
I love that. Tools are so important just
Mm.
in everyday life, but particularly for procrastination and
Oh,
anxiety. And like you
oh,
said, when you're finding yourself hearing the narrative, it's good just to go to your tool belt. It's like, okay,
yeah,
right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, snap out of it, or
exactly.
whatever it
Yeah,
may be, right? So, just
yeah.
being able to have that self awareness and self reflection is the
Mm.
first steps to moving forward and diving in. So, before we wrap up, I'd love to offer a moment of reconnection, a few gentle questions I ask every guest.
Okay.
What are the ways you reconnect with yourself each day, Annie?
Meditation for sure is a
Mm.
major one for me. So whether it's doing meditation from like Insight Timer app, just having that sort of loving
Love that
kindness.
app.
Yeah, love. There's an Australian on there. He does a loving kindness and compassion meditation.
Um,
It's only 15 minutes, but just remembering to have loving kindness and compassion for yourself, then for
mhm,
someone you love, someone who you don't really know, and then someone who you've probably got problems with as well, and realizing you can have that for every single human being and being able to live your life like that. So that's great. I've also got meditations from the course I did as well. And they just really help me be able to sort of be grounded, focused, and be able to continue my day. So that's a major one for me.
mm. What season of life are you in right now?
A growth season for sure. Just like I said, not letting fear get in my way anymore. It's just taking up too
Mm.
much of my time.
What does living from the inside out mean to you?
I think it's looking after myself in a way that really suits my needs. So making sure I'm eating the right foods, drinking enough water, the basic things really, and then just really making sure that for me, it's more about my mind, being able to control my mind because it just can go off and create so many random stories that aren't true. And
Mm.
It's
Mm.
bizarre, the stories we make up in our head and think that they
Totally.
are, you know.
We've all got that.
Yeah.
So, what would you love people to feel after listening to this conversation?
I would like them to feel, well, to know that they're not alone in their thoughts and what they're thinking, and to understand that anxiety, procrastination are things that happen to all of us. And there's nothing wrong with us when that happens. To understand that there are tools out there as well that you can use to be able to help you get through day to day life. There's no like one fix, there's not like a pill that's going to fix everything all at once. And I think people just assume, like I said, you go to a meditation course and you think, oh, okay, I feel great now. But slowly and slowly, you're just going to revert back to the way you were.
Mhm.
You have to keep chipping at it every single day, and then that's when you'll start to see these results, and you'll start to feel happier and have more compassion for yourself, more compassion for other people, and you'll lead
Mm.
then a much healthier and better life.
Oh, that's such a beautiful way to end. That is really lovely. That really
Thank you.
resonated. Annie, thank you so much for sharing your story with such openness today. Your reflections on place, identity, and authenticity, and your willingness to speak honestly about letting go, the need to fit in. You've brought so much depth to this conversation today, and I know many people will resonate and feel seen and heard. Where can people find you if they want to keep listening to your lovely stories?
Yeah, thank you. So you can find me at Instagram is The Londoner in Sydney, YouTube's Londoner in Sydney. My website is londonsydney.com. And then we've got podcasts as well, which is the Expat Reality Podcast, which is where we interview other people who have moved to and from Australia and what their stories have been as well.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation.